What is up, my Aish friends? How you doing? My name is Ari. Many of you know me as Rabbi Ari. See it now on the screen. I am so stoked to be hosting tonight's Thursday Night Live, as we call Tikkun in the Tundra. It's so appropriate at this time to be interviewing the person that I'm going to bring on soon. You know, we are in the time of Hanukkah. Hanukkah, as the great Adam Sandler has said in the past, the festival of lights. And Hanukkah is really a time where we're celebrating our freedom, not necessarily from being physically threatened, but freedom from being persecuted more in our way of life and our philosophy, and kind of given this reality of believe what we believe and everything's okay, and don't believe what we believe and everything will not be okay. The Maccabees fought off the idea of the Greeks at this time, the Greek philosophy, the idea that the physical realm, the physical world is everything, that there's nothing beyond themselves. And the Jewish people, as we know, we are a nation that believes that there's a starting point to this universe. We are a nation that believes that the world was created from something, from the Almighty, created on purpose and for a purpose. And this is really what we were battling. You know, the rabbis tell us in the beginning of Genesis, it says, right in Bereshit, the first few verses, it says, V'choshech al pnei Sam, and there was a darkness that enveloped the land, the world. There was this massive darkness, and the rabbis jumped right away and they said, you know what that darkness is? You know what the Torah is referring to? That darkness is the Greeks. That darkness is Hellenism, this idea. And the question is why? The Greeks, you think about it, they're you know, they were so enlightened. They had such enlightenment. They brought a lot of ideas into the world, philosophy and all these different things. And here the Jewish nation is saying this is a darkness. And like I said before, the reason why is because they didn't see anything beyond themselves, their own mind, which they basically, their idea was, if I don't see it, then it doesn't exist. And this was something the Jewish people obviously had a battle against. When the Greeks took over the temple and they ravaged the temple and they tried to establish their ideas within the temple, many Jews followed their ideas. Many Jews wanted to be Hellenized and wanted to look like Greeks and act like Greeks. And then Matisyahu, the one who started this guerrilla war, came in and said, no, we must battle against this for the sake of our heritage, for the sake of our belief. We must keep this idea of light in this world, this idea that the world was created for a purpose. And they battled out the Greeks. They pushed them out of the temple. They found this jar of oil, that one clear, clean jar of oil that wasn't tampered with and was only supposed to last 1, and it ended up lasting 8. And the rabbis ask on that again, why 8? Why not 7 or 6? It would have been a miracle if it lasted even 3 days. It was only enough to last 1. And they said because 8 represents something that's above nature, right? There are 7 days of the week, 7 notes to music. 7 represents finite, 7 represents the physical world. 8 is one above. And by that light lasting for 8 days was kind of like this locked in reality that God supported what we did, that God was behind us, this idea that there's something above the natural world. And our purpose in this world is to connect to that light, connect to our Creator, and flow that light out into the world so we can make the world a better place. And we light those candles in our windows in the darkest time of the year to flow the light out, to represent that we want to flow goodness and tov and light out into the world. And on that, we have this unbelievable guest tonight. I don't even know where to start. This is an Orthodox Jew. He's a judge in a tribal court in Sitka, Alaska. All right, so you're already. I'm already like, I never even heard. I'm gonna say it. I never really even heard of Sitka before I researched. You know, Alaska. To me, I'm from Long Island. You know, we don't get out in the nature so much. Alaska. The only thing I know about Alaska is I come from an affluent neighborhood, and my parents one summer they went to Alaska, and I threw this epic July 4th party in my house. And that's all I know about Alaska. So I'm happy to, obviously, I've been a little more cultured since that time. And more so to bring on Judge, we call him, the guys that are close call him Judge V, Judge David Abraham Voluck, who's going to come on the show now. And I'm really excited to get this interview started. So if we could bring on Judge V. What's up, Judge?
Hello.
How are we doing?
Good. That was a good story. So Alaska was to your benefit in high school.
Yes. In high school, it worked out great, man. I'm like, Alaska, July 4th. My friends, they never, till this day, they're like, epic. So, I hope I got a little more culture in me, and since then, I get a little more deep into Alaska. So, Judge, I mean, let's just start. You're an Orthodox Jew. You're living in Alaska. You're in a tribal court. That is the most unique thing, for me at least, for an Orthodox Jew to be doing. So let's start, like, maybe give us a little background, like where you're from, how you grew up, how you got into this, and how you managed to find yourself in this part of Alaska.
Oh my. Just that, huh? Well, so the native people here, Rabbi, counseled me that before I open this big trap of mine, that I open with a little saying. It's in Tlinkit, which is the Indians I work with mostly, but it's in English, and it's basically, if I should, God forbid, say anything that's off color or offensive to anyone, you or anyone else on the show, please know that's not my intention. The good Lord has given me a lot of energy and chayas, and sometimes my mouth moves faster than my brain. So I'll just put that out. Forgive me at the front end, and then we can dive into the interview. How's that sound?
Forgiven. we all struggle with the same thing, by the way.
I'm forgiven already.
It's not exclusive to you, Judge.
All right. Yeah. No, I think when they taught me how to do that before I speak, I was like, that's all right. So, right. I mean, part of this is I've learned a great deal of menschlichkeit and derech eretz, whatever you call it, from the tribes that I work with. And then I've been able to bring over some concepts to them as well. So it's been a nice cross-pollination, I'll call it. Mm-hmm. But anyway, just I would love to start this like Steve. Oh God, he was so funny in The Jerk. Steve Martin, maybe it was.
Steve Martin, yeah.
Yeah, but I won't start it like that because that's politically incorrect. And so I'll just say I was born on the main line of Philadelphia, and was raised in a proud but conservative kind of Jewish home. And like most Jews of my time after bar mitzvah, I just kind of chased the American dream, Hellenism, whatever you want to call it. And but I think most people on this show will know what I'm talking about, that there's this burning inside of a Yiddish neshama, in a Jewish soul. And that is, we can't help ourselves. If the world's not right in some place, we want to fix it. This whole idea of Tikkun in the Tundra, or Tikkun anywhere you are, I think Jews are on fire, and that's why we are always at the front of the line of Marxism, socialism, capitalism, feminism, environmentalism, any ism you want to think of. Who are the people at the front of the line marching? And it's usually members of the tribe. Mm-hmm. And so I also had this aching, spiritual aching to do well in the world and to heal things that I saw were broken. And so from Philly, I wandered west, and I went to visit a roommate out in Boulder, Colorado. And I hadn't really ever left Philadelphia. And I said, oh my God, people live in places like this? You know, like shattered my East Coast mind. I was like,
Right.
what? So anyway, when it came to law school, I went to Portland, Oregon, which is an unbelievably gorgeous, amazing outdoor rainforest place, and studied environmental law. So I was going to be a natural resources, environmental kind of greeny guy that was going to save the world in that sense. But something interesting happened to me as I dove into this, as I think Jewish souls dive into things. I noticed there was still something missing. And eventually I came to Alaska and began working for the Indians here. And that's when it clicked for me, because it was Tikkun Olam, but not because the trees were pretty and I love the bunnies and the whales, which I do, but also because there were like human beings interacting with Hashem's world and living off of it. And they need those trees there to protect the deer from the heavy snows so that they can hunt the deer, so that they have stew on their table. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like a tree for a tree's sake, although I'm a Lorax. Mm-hmm. It became humanized. And that just was the connection. If I may, for one more minute, and then I'll shut up and let you ask me more questions. You know, and when I met the Indian tribal people, they are incredibly spiritual. Like, they just come right out with it, you know, and like on the East Coast, if you're in a business meeting, like if someone opens the meeting with a prayer, like everyone's going to break into a sweat and start looking for the emergency exit. You know what I mean? But with the Indians, of course you open an important meeting with a prayer. Like, we're calling in the help of the Creator so we can, and I was like, what? And then they are an oral people. So the written word's only been here about 100 years, if you can imagine, because our people have been playing with writing for thousands of years. So when you meet an oral people and you see how they orate, and that their minds, their memories were like traps, because nowadays, I don't know about you, Rabbi, someone tells me something, if I want to remember it, I got to write it down real quick. I got to jot a note or whatever. And I think we weakened our minds in one way. I mean, the written word's amazing in another way, but I think we weakened our memories because we just write it down. And I think maybe that's what the rabbis were really worried about when the oral tradition was starting to be written. They were like, wait a minute, because there's something powerful about the oral and memory and heart as opposed to a page. And when I saw tribal leaders orate and remember stories, I went, and I saw that our oral tradition could very well be extremely accurate. Because I don't know about when you were a kid, we used to play the telephone game, you know? And so I thought from the telephone game, as soon as I started to learn about, I became more of a Bali Tshuva and started to learn about the oral tradition. I was like, wait a minute, telephone game. Right. But when I saw how oral people, there's special people who are storytellers, and they're recognized from a young age as having phenomenal skill. And I'm sure our people have that as well. And I've met a few. And so you realize I started to see the connections with our history. And it was profound, as you can see, to my mother's chagrin. She said, I don't mind if you're Jewish. You got to be so Jewish. Right.
That's amazing.
And I want to just do one quick correction. I wouldn't call myself an Orthodox Jew. I'm trying to be observant. Right. Okay. And I'm a work in progress. So
I'm with you, Judge.
Yeah. Don't, slap the big hechsher on me, but I'm working hard because I believe in our way of life and our traditions and our people.
Wow. No, it's interesting you said that. I'm totally with you on that. Like, I'm a rabbi. I worked, for Aish for many years, and I guess under the the sections, or
Mhm.
Orthodox. You go, they're always like, "Oh, Rabbi, you're Orthodox, you're an Orthodox Rabbi," and I said, "Well,
Mhm.
what is Orthodox? You're growing in your heritage. You're honest with
Mhm.
yourself. I don't like the label, so I'm totally with you. As long as you're
Okay.
on that journey and you're going towards that, towards that end game of striving for truth and honesty and
Mm.
and light,
Mm.
then I believe, like you, I guess we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And the labels kind of very divisive. So
Mhm.
I'm totally with you on that as well,
Word.
which is beautiful. So we're already vibing right here now.
I'm vibing with you.
Because Judge, I could call you, I can call you Rabbi now too. You've already taught me a few things, which is the most, I think, so far. Just hitting on that point, and then we'll get to the next question. It's unbelievable to be able to, and it gives me such chizik, strength, as we say,
Mm.
when you say something, how learning from these people, how the oral tradition, how oral verbal communication and memory can be so sharp, because it's a very sticky topic in general, where Jews are like, oh, okay, but it was passed down verbally, what was lost, what was gained.
Mhm.
And obviously it was written down at a certain time when the rabbis felt like maybe it's going to be lost completely, but
Mhm.
it's so unbelievable to hear that from you. It's incredible. And I think, I'm wondering, because I know the verbal tradition for us too, from a Jewish perspective, it's kind of keeps us connected to the previous generation. When you have to rely on the verbal transmission,
Mm.
then you're also connected. You're not just looking forward, but you're connecting from behind and then going forward. And they're
Mm.
helping you kind of get to that next phase where you're linked to the previous generation. I believe in a certain way, that's what Judaism is about too, is kind of keeping that continuity, keeping the link in the chain of the heritage. I'm wondering, do these people, these Indians, and I'm not sure which ones we're referring to now, but by the way, I just learned to Tlinkit because it's not spelled that way, so I had to research that too. So I didn't
Right.
sound like an idiot. I caught that beforehand. But do they, how are they with the previous generations, respect for their elders, kind of like connected to, their parents, grandparents, and their ancestors?
I'm glad you asked me that. So, like I said, living with living here and spending time with the tribe. Like I said, I was blessed with a lot of aha moments. And one of those moments was at a large tribal gathering. And it was buffet style. You've been to a breakfast before, I'm sure, which can oftentimes resemble roller derby, trying to get to the good stuff first, right?
Right.
And so it was a huge buffet, and I think it was a long meeting, and we were all far starving, if you know what I mean. You were ready to eat. And when it came time to en masse attack the buffet table, the young people were serving the elders.
Wow.
So, and I think we've lost this a little bit in our culture, God bless us, but we feed the kids first, right? Kids first. And amongst the tribe, no, it's the elders first. And once they all get, then you get in line. And not only that, the younger people are serving them. And I was like, this is a good way. And I would love for us to get back to that, because I feel, sometimes Jews love our children so much. Sometimes maybe we love them too much and we put them on the therapist couch. And that's what I said in my interview to the Israeli paper. They were kind of asking me about my kids, and they're the only Jews here, and how does that work? And I said, well, I'm putting them on the therapist couch like any other good Jewish parent, But they have a phenomenal respect for tradition, phenomenal respect for their elders, who are the tradition bearers. And that's who's going to teach them, like you said, in this oral tradition. And it's grievous when an elder passes, because many books in the library pass with them. And so they are in a frantic stage of survival, of exile. And so that's another interesting parallel between the Jews and the Indians, is their exile their gullus, if you will, began with colonization. So really, they're kind of in 200 and 300 years, which is the baby steps of a gullus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we could say, "Oh, you think that's bad? Sit down," you know. But if there is a people for God to send to them, and I had a very interesting metaphor at one point that we can get into, but I view myself as an itinerant carpenter, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so the model for indigenous people is now. And so they have to build a teva or an ark to protect the seeds of their future. And so I feel like Hashem has sent me here as a carpenter, because who knows about Gullus but Jews, you know, and how to survive upheaval and turmoil. So it's a very interesting shidduch I think Hashem has made to bring me here at this time.
This someone just sent in a question now, which I guess is relevant, you know, to what you're saying. Is how do you, as a judge, how do you impart your Jewish values into your work? You know, how does this flow take place? Like, maybe first, you know, even before that, maybe first, you know, explain. I don't know if everyone in the audience knows. I'm just thinking from my perspective. You know, what a tribal judge. You know, what the function of a tribal judge is, and then maybe we can segue into like how being a Jew kind of you know helps this process.
That's a good segue, and nice use of the word segue, by the way, sir.
I love this, man.
So it's a really good question. So I'm going to give you this quick and skinny, because you know, people have spent a couple hundred years dealing with indigenous people and their rights, and you know. Discovering America, but wait a minute, there's some people already living here. What do we do about that, right? So it's a whole body of law that I will not bore you with. But the short version is the European explorers and colonists were used to using European models to make deals between countries. And so the way that it was done was King of France would cut a deal with the King of Spain, and the King of Spain would cut a deal with the King of England, and it was sovereign to sovereign. And you can see hidden in the word sovereign the word reign, which in Latin means king. Okay, so it was always a government sovereign to a government negotiation, and when they cut a deal, what did they call it? A treaty. And we still have these internationally. We have treaties with Russia. We have treaties about clean air. We have treaties with other nations. So when the colonizers and the explorers came, the way they dealt was, we need to cut a deal, because I don't know if people study history much, but the early explorers were in deep, dire doo-doo. That's a legal term of art, Rabbi. And they were having a hard time surviving in America, food-wise, cold, disease, and the natives helped them. And the natives were a lot stronger than them in the early days, so they had to cut a deal. And the deal was a treaty, sovereign to sovereign. So, and that model has continued to 2020, that every Indian tribe is its own sovereign nation. They can have their own government and their own court system and their own laws. Now, long story short, the Uncle Sam's got to be in charge ultimately. So they were called domestic dependent nations. So they're a weird quasi creation, but they are their own nations. And that's why you'll hear in New York, the Iroquois nation, the Oneida nation, the Navajo nation. They are countries. They are tiny countries in America. So the Tlinkit nation, where I live, is their own sovereign government, and they have their own court. And lo and behold, for some reason, they chose a Meshuggah Jew to help do that for a while. And so it was originally that I was to mentor and train tribal citizens to take over. So I'm supposed to put myself out of a job. And I'm cool with that, because it's like a based-in. You know, eventually you want the tribe on the based-in, right? So, but, you know, my goofiness, my heart, and my approach, the natives kind of like it. And
Right.
the cool
Wow.
part is I don't know their stuff.
Right.
So in a small village where you grow up together, I remember who threw up on the bus in 3rd grade, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
these things are locked in your mind.
Mhm.
So they come to me, they see this cockamamie judge, and they don't blink. It's funny. They see this
Wow.
Hasidic Jew, and they don't blink.
Uh-huh.
And because I don't know their stuff, they feel comfortable. And so what started 15 years ago as a mentorship and let me work myself out of the job, they just say, stay, we like it.
Wow. That's amazing.
You know? And so how do I bring Judaism
Right.
in? In so many ways. In so many ways. Because like I said, they are extremely spiritual on their shirt. So they're locked and loaded to get into important topics about life. And God bless us, for the last 4,000 years, our ancestors have ripped apart, taped back together, and then ripped apart again important concepts in life. And so I'm able to share that wisdom in a non-offensive, non-missionary, non-proselytizing
Mhm.
way, because that's not our deal.
Right.
And I'm able to put this out and say, does this help? And 9 times out of the 10, you know, Torah's emes,
Wow.
right? And
Mhm.
so if you just put it out there and I'm not citing in the name of Rabbi Akiva, if not now, when? I'm
Right.
just putting out the concepts of Judaism.
Uh-huh.
And because it's truth, they're
Wow.
like, that will help. And
Wow.
so I'm able to bring in our love of children, our love of family, our tribalism, our survival, our resilience, and all of the wisdom from Pirkei Avos to King Solomon. Oh my God, the story about chopping the baby in half. I
Right.
mean, you know, we have volumes of wisdom to share, and I'm allowed to, and it's not weird. Let's put it that way. As Austin Powers says, it doesn't get weird, baby.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And I mean, you've been there for a while. If you had any interesting stories or any things that happened to you since you've been there that maybe you can share with the crowd, anything like that stood out in terms of your interaction with the tribes and so on and so forth.
Okay. That's a hard one. Partly because I'm passing 50, Rabbi, and like I told you, I was blaming the written word on my weakening memory,
Right,
but I'm
right,
not
right.
sure if that is what it is. You know, one thing that pops into my mind that I'll share
Uh-huh.
was my first sweat.
Uh-huh.
And this taught me what davening was.
Mm-hmm.
And because, you know, as I was getting more and more, I never did tell you the crazy story that really turned me back to Yiddishkeit. So maybe I'll start that and segue to the sweat very quickly. So one of the things about the Tlinkit people is they have a custom of adopting outsiders. Not everyone, but if they like you, they'll adopt you culturally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a big honor. And so after a few years of them watching me, they decided maybe he's okay. And so I was approached by a mother. She had a son who had drowned, and his name was David. And she was convinced I was a Gilgul, a reincarnation of her son, David.
Wow.
So she comes to me and she says, I'd like to adopt you as my son. And she was a very spiritual lady, Rabbi. I don't know if you've ever sat next to someone and you kind of feel their buzz, if you understand what I'm talking about. I know I'm being weird, but I promised it wouldn't get weird, baby, but I lied. And so she had this vibration where I was like, all right, I'm in. Right. So the adoption's coming and she has a dream. And she tells me that she was visited by her grandmother, and I was in the dream. And the grandmother says, "No," in Tlinkit, of course. "Who's this guy?" And she explains, "It's David. He works for our tribe. I want to adopt him." Gives her the whole Misa. And the grandmother says, "Okay, have you picked out a name for him now?" Sorry, my computer's trying to reboot while we're talking. And so the woman who was adopting me, she said, "Yes, I picked out such and such Tlinkit name. Like Jews, they name you after someone who's deceased, so you can carry on that name." Okay. So the grandmother said to her, "You cannot give him that name. He comes from his own tribe." And so Jessie wakes up from the dream, comes to me, and she goes, "What tribe are you from?" My grandmother says, "You come from your own tribe." And that, Rabbi, was a very big moment where I had to ask myself, how do I answer that question? And started the digging into our past, our heritage, and going, holy. Because you need to understand, and I know you do, so you'll groove on what I'm saying. You know, when I came here, I was a younger man. I was skinny without a beard. I was fresh out of law school. So being with Native people was a very spiritual experience for me. And I was seeking out an ancient, oral, traditional tradition, right? Because we were thirsty from what we got on the, you know, in our upbringing. We're thirsty. And as she asked me what tribe I was from, it took my focus away from the Tlinkit way of life, still connected. You know, I'm not being bipolar here. Everything's a spectrum. But it started to pull my head to, where am I from? And when you find out our history, I mean, I'm just talking about the news, Rabbi. I'm not, you know I'm supposed to be a judge and I'm unbiased, blah, 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 blah. I'm talking about the news of our history and our impact. You go, holy. That's how they say it up here. How the Indians, instead of holy, they go, holy. And you go, wow, we come from an ancient people. We come from tradition. We come from spirit. And we don't need to go anywhere for a treasure chest. But what did the Indians teach me? Okay, so they do have some things that they can teach us. One of them's how to daven. Okay, I love us, you know I do. But the whole Indian of sitting and going ba 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 in a shul and rapid fire and we're getting it done and all that never worked for me. My what do they call that pendulum that helps you find your time? What's that called? Do you know? Are you a musician? No. Okay, sorry. Anyway, my pendulum moves slower than that. And so I never felt comfortable in a shul. I know people will pelt me with rocks and garbage for this. But when I had my first sweat and they took me into the darkness of the tent and started bringing in these lava pumice rocks that are on fire because they've been cooking them. You start at like 3 a.m. and you cook lava rocks in the forest in the dark for like 4 hours. Okay. Silence, mostly meditative, some talk, and then they're ready. And so they take you into the tent and in come these lava rocks and they have, you know, various herbs and things that they sprinkle on them. So you're getting the whole July 4th crazy effect in this black tent. And then the heat comes and then they start praying in circles. And they, you know, there's a famous Jewish saying, words from the heart enter the heart. They pray not with a book, and I'm not bagging on our books. I value them and I need them. But they pray straight from the heart, and they opened up my mind to this is what it means to talk to the Creator. This is what it means to pray. And so I was able, hopefully, to bring some of that sweat lodge learning to my davening. So that is one area where they have really, really helped.
Wow, that's incredible. Wow, I'm mesmerized by that. That's so beautiful. I agree with you also. I think prayer in general. Look, we have the format, but I think it's very important within the format to find your voice. To be able to connect your heart, and there are. We're not. It's obviously not a prayer interview right now, but there are parts
Right.
where I guess you can. Within your prayers, that you can kind of flow your own
Those are
ideas,
the
and I think,
places I'm going, Rabbi,
yeah,
lately. I don't finish the whole thing. I will stay here on, before God and internet,
right, right,
but those little spots, those windows where
right,
you're allowed to talk,
yeah,
and pray from the heart.
yeah,
As I get older, I'm spending more time in
yeah.
those windows.
And especially now too. I think it's an interesting thing. I think maybe a few years ago, people would be like, "Oh, this guy is living out in Alaska in some like bumblebuck." What now with everything going on here, I'm like, I'd be like, "You're insane." Now I think it's the other way around. I'm like, "Wait a
Right.
minute, maybe this dude's got it right,
Right.
and we all got
My
it
mom
wrong."
thought I was crazy, but she didn't know. I had a
As we're
plan.
Oh my God, as we're sitting here, but I think that's also part of it too. Speaking about prayer, like obviously, to go biblical to our forefathers, and everyone, like, it all started out in nature. It all started in these areas where it's kind of like really, and I know for myself too, and I do a lot of surfing, and I'm an avid camp. I go camping, a lot out of Adirondacks. I used to go all the time, and there's definitely a clarity that you have when you kind of
Right.
move away from the distractions and kind of get into your own. So in terms of like, I know you have Shabbos there. We were talking a little before, which is insane because of the when it gets dark and light. I don't know how you do that, but how do you ever speak to the tribes about Shabbat? Do they what's their reaction to like the whole Shabbos thing, and like how do they view it and the kind of exchange? I think that would be cool to hear.
Sure. So I'm so lucky because as I became more observant, obviously my parents and everybody else was like, how you gonna make a parnosa? With
Right.
this whole Shabbos thing, and you got Shavuos, and it's 2 days, and it goes into a third day, and and you got your Sukkos, and everyone, how do you exist? And so every Jew kind of has to bob and weave to deal with the pace of commerce, and yet abide by our calendar, which is awesome and beautiful. But it's so anywho's the beautiful, lucky, blessed thing is that the natives understand tradition. They are battling to preserve their own. So when I come and say, and by the way, I can't be there because this is Sukkot and it's part of. They're like that gesundheit, hate, and they say pray for us too, and they're very so open to all my little isms, my weird diet. Like, why are you just eating tuna out of a can, bro? Like we're having ribs over here, and But I just tell them it's my tradition, and they are like, excellent.
Wow.
Shabbos is its own genius. And you don't have to be in Alaska for people, and especially with the devices now and the ever flow of Twitter spheres and interwebs and ding dong and all this stuff. And I do it too. So I'm not like being a big, when that day comes and you can turn off, it is a lifesaver. And now everyone around me sees it. And they don't even mess with me, and they're jealous. They're like, I should do that. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to say what you should. Let's not should all over ourselves, right? But what a present. But when you first start to learn about Shabbos, and for kids, it's all what I can't do. And it's like you chafe on it.
Right.
And people, how do you not be able to? And now the genius of Shabbos has come out.
Yeah.
And may I share one other idea with you that occurred to me? Was, I think one of our nicknames is Al Am Kasav, the people of the book.
Yeah.
And, we will make sure that books never die.
Mhm.
Because on Shabbos, you
Right.
can't use your Kindle. You can't use
Right.
your phone. You can't. So it is amazing. It's a miracle how all of the Torah can fit on a microchip. That's hello. Can we talk about that for a second?
Right.
Oh,
Right.
I'm sure that's another show.
Right.
So I won't go there. But on Shabbos, you cannot use the microchip. So
Right.
we Jewish people will always need books.
Right.
And that, so we will guarantee that till the end of time, there will always be books.
Because
It's
of Shabbos,
interesting.
books
Yeah.
and board games too.
Yeah.
Right?
So
Like
the gift of
who plays board games anymore?
yeah.
You know?
And so as I became observant, I just put that boundary up.
Uh-huh.
And Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson of
Yeah.
blessed memory said, "You wear your Jewish with pride, everyone will stand at attention and respect you.
Mhm.
If you're scared of it, that's when the weird stuff starts." And it was kind of a revolutionary idea because my family, like the rest of them, had come here to hide.
Right.
And we were all kind of a little feeling weird inside
Right.
about how, like my mom said, do you have to be that Jewish?
Right.
And the Rebbe was like, be proud and no one's going to mess with you.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm telling you, Rabbi, Bli Ayin Hara, poo, poo, poo.
Right.
I just come with this thing and everyone's like, okay.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow.
And no one
That's really
messes with
incredible.
me. Yeah.
Maybe it's because you're a judge also.
That helps. That helps.
Right, right. So I saw there's a term "frozen chosen." That's what the term came on. I was looking at one of your news clips, one of your interviews, the "frozen chosen." What's that about?
I don't know. That's just people love to hear about Alaska. It doesn't
Right.
matter who. It's a
Right.
mysterious land.
Uh-huh.
And so everyone's up for a good Alaska story.
Right.
And so I love to make people laugh.
Right.
I think that is one of the geniuses of our people and how we've survived.
Mm-hmm.
And I find in my courtroom, people come to the courtroom traumatized because you're not going there for fun. You're not picking up the lottery ticket at the courtroom.
Right,
So
right.
9 times out of 10, except for adoptions, you're coming there because something's broken.
Yeah.
And the people I work with, and I think also the Jewish people,
Mhm.
have what we call historical trauma. And they're finding in research that it's more than just growing up with grandma who survived the Holocaust and she washed and dried the Ziploc bags because she never
Right.
knew that there would be another box of
Right.
Ziploc bags. That it actually can pass epigenetically through our bloodstream from our ancestors.
Uh-huh.
And we are, as I like to say, survivors of survivors.
Right.
So if you think about our chain of survival, we're carrying with us in our DNA what's called some historical trauma, to put it mildly. And same with the indigenous people that I work with.
Uh-huh.
So I come to court with the Hippocratic oath, first do no harm. And so I know the courtroom already is a re-traumatizing experience to someone who's already traumatized. So I bring humor. And it is this salve that immediately relaxes people's shoulders.
Mhm.
They can let their hair down and we can talk about hard stuff. And I think there's a famous story in the Talmud. You would know this better than I. Maybe it was Rebbe who would start every lesson with a joke. And I really think that is wise because the laughter and the oxygen and the humor brings everyone down to breathe and then they can start.
Wow.
So Frozen Chosen, it makes you giggle. It makes you giggle. It's making you giggle right now.
I love
So
it.
that's why we do it.
It's incredible. So
Yeah.
in terms of the indigenous people, how do they, obviously you're Jewish, you're also American. What's their view in terms of the American people, in terms of, where they're at now? I know that I'm like I said, I don't want to get too political here, but I know that there's but Thanksgiving, I never growing up, you never saw this, but obviously now everything's becoming more PC and everyone's got something to charge for, and you never really saw this Thanksgiving,
the sideshow,
the holiday. Right?
What's the story behind the story?
Right. Then you just, instead we'll just push that and push a different conflict. And
what my favorite, I don't know if this ever happened to you, but for sure where I live, I'm one of the only Jews anyone's ever met.
Right.
So the famous question is, do Jews celebrate Thanksgiving? Right. I'm like, bro, every week.
Right.
If there's eating and we're going to say thanks, of course we celebrate Thanksgiving. But where indigenous people are is a very interesting thing. There has been a lot of not okay stuff, I'll put it mildly, and you can Google it. I'm not going to be a historian right now, but shocking business. And I said this in my video interview listen, the word genocide has become very popular. And, and that upsets me as a Jew because we actually know what that word is.
Right.
And so Chas v'chalila, I want no one to have any harm. There's tragedies and there's horrors and there's all kinds of things. But now if 10 people die, they call it a genocide.
Right.
And I'm like, whoa, let's not cheapen the language. I'm a big word fan, and I don't like when words become misused or they lose their efficacy. So when I look at the word genocide and I look at the loss of life and the loss of way of life and the loss of land and just everything, I believe that you could use that term when it comes to indigenous people. So they could have a lot of hard feelings about America the Beautiful and from sea to shining sea and all that stuff. Shockingly, they're phenomenally patriotic.
Wow.
And if you go to any veterans gathering, the unbelievable service to this country of Native Americans always blew me away. I was like, what? Like, I could see one to hate on America. They serve America. So I don't understand, but God bless. And so I forgot what your question was. So kind of, but you know what? They're coming out. And so here in Sitka, we had our own little thing where we live on what's called Baranof Island. So who were the first white folks here? Russians. So we're on the other end of the country. So you got New York, right? Which is based on England and the Duke of York and whatever. Over here, we got Karamazov and Baranov and Chichagov. Everything's these phenomenal 10-gallon Russian words. And Baranov was not a nice man. He enslaved for furs. He massacred. He was not a nice man. And so here we're on Baranof Island, and in the center of our town is a statue of Baranov. And the likeness was like he was this statesman. He was holding this Declaration of Independence and such an important guy when he's a war criminal, honestly. I mean, just look it up. I'm not making this up. I'm sorry. You think I'm political? No, I'm not. I'm telling you the news. So we just said, why is this person and this story the first thing that a visitor to Sitka meets? When your parents went on their cruise, they probably came to Sitka, and this was the first thing they met was Alexander Baranov. And so we had it removed. And the tribe was behind that. And it was not to be edgy. This wasn't the Red Panthers, it was like, let's tell a better story. Let's tell a real story and a better one, because that story was one false. And why is it the first story? Anyway, sorry to go off on
first of all, I think it's very encouraging. I think first of all, we'll get back to the Jewish reality in that, but it's very encouraging to hear that. And I think in general, part of Tikkun Olam. However, things evolve. Obviously, conflict always comes in with any land, with any culture, with any people. But to see a people that can embrace and find places to be at peace and to kind of go with what's there as opposed to just, anger and frustration and, I got wrong, but like to see America for all the opportunity and great things that it has provided, and to kind of bond with that as an American and as a Jew who, I think that's a big lesson for all of us in general.
Amen.
So that's a beautiful thing.
Let me just say, of course, like they are human. So
Right.
there are poles. There's
Right.
on the one side who I'm sure are people like, I want to blow it up.
Right.
I cannot believe what they did. And they
Right.
got a point. And then there's people on the other end who have bought into that their ancestors were savages and that they need to evolve. And like no tribalism. So but those populations are small. What I'm describing to you is more of the mass of people are proud Americans. They want the story told straight. And what are we going to do for tomorrow? And it's very Jewish in a way.
Yeah, I think so too. I think for sure. Another question someone just posted, in terms of your Judaism, kosher food, mikvah, all these different things that you kind of part of our heritage and religion. How do you deal with that? And,
right. That's a good question. First of all, I need to give some snaps to our producer, Adam, for giving me the word metronome. So that is the Judge V's metronome is a little slower than the average bear. So, okay, let's talk mikvah for a second because that's fun, right? So, and then maybe I should say, okay, here we go. So 3 mikvaot we would use. There is, of course, mikvah everywhere you want to go because we live on the ocean.
Right.
And so when my father-in-law comes, we do the polar bear mikvah, and we're very religious. And boy, are you awake when you're done that because the water here is freezing. And then what's worse is when you get out, you're freezing and more freezing. No, it's actually a weird thing, actually. Your body, I think, thrusts all this blood to the surface. So when you get out, you are on fire. It's crazy thing. But anyway, the women don't so much like to jump in the ocean, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
So we have hot springs here. A natural volcano, because we're on volcano, natural volcanic hot springs in rainforest, old growth rainforest. So, but the way to get there is a plane. You got to hire a small plane, and it's a little shaky and scary and all that, and not cheap. We've done that, and that was amazing. But the regular month to month, there is a mikvah in Anchorage, thank God, that they had originally built for a chaplain that was up there, and then the church expanded and exploded that. But the rabbi and Rebbitzin from Chabad opened one in Anchorage. And then we can go to Seattle. They're almost equidistant, Anchorage or Seattle, to get your shot of the high holidays, kosher food, mikvah, all that stuff. Oh, nice. That's kind of what it looked like. It's one of my favorite things in the world is a good hot spring in a forest. Oh, my.
Yeah, I was in Costa Rica. I found one.
Oh, my.
First trip out there, went to the rainforest over there.
Please.
Yeah, the best,
that's the mikvah, but it was like each time we went, it was like $1,000. So you can imagine after a while, the hot spring in the forest just doesn't look right on the ledger. I'm no longer married. I'm just going to say. So right now, thankfully, that was every month. It was a thing. Right now, it's not a thing, and so that has been lifted. And in the age of internet delivery, if I'm willing to pay shipping, I can get almost any kosher nosh or meat in the world. But I will say we are pescatarians a lot. So we eat a lot of fish, and it's healthy, it's kosher, and it's good for my coat.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really incredible. Okay, so um one more thing, and then we got to wrap it up. It's
Mm.
8:54. But what would you say, like similarities maybe between Jewish culture and Indian culture? Would you any similarities that you see between the two cultures that really stuck out? I mean, I know you said you have prayer, right? You spoke about
Mm.
prayer a little bit,
Hmm.
and I guess respecting our elders, which you're saying
Mm. We need to
they're
get
doing
back on the horn
they're
on
doing a
that.
little
Yeah.
better. It
Yeah.
depends. I think different cultures, though. So I mean,
Mm.
different communities. I've seen communities where like little kids like serving their grandparents, and
Dang
like
straight.
just
I
like
love
9 days.
that. It's like
Not my
watching
community.
music. Right. And
Me,
like,
my kids are on their phone. I'm like, yo,
right.
like on the
And,
computer. Like,
yeah.
come on. Can you just go get me some water? Come on, Dad. Right?
Yeah, I miss that. I miss that. Like, we have a lot of reverence in our culture.
Right.
And
Right.
I was always weirded out when I first started to go to yeshivas and where people would stand up when, like a
Right.
Rosh would walk in. And
Right.
I was kind of like, what's up with that? But you
Right.
know what? I think reverence is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm down with reverence
Yeah.
and bring it on. I mean, it's a good thing, respecting our elders and
Right.
young people being taught. And we love them so much.
Right.
And we treat them like the center of the universe.
Mhm.
And then I think we have to spend some time unlearning that so that they become servants. And I don't mean that in a horrible way. I mean like avoda of like, service is a really high level of
Right.
humanness,
Right.
and to serve your grandparents and to serve your father and to serve your mother, and for that respect to go both ways. Of course, I mean, people know how to be bosses and
Mhm.
disrespectful and serve me and because I
Right.
said so. Well, that's
Right.
just dumb too.
Right.
Reverence needs to flow both ways.
Right. 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 That's beautiful.
Mm.
All right. Listen. So, if you had one more thing, if you had to do it all over again, would you Would you choose the same journey, or you're like,
Oh
maybe
my
I should have stayed in
I'm
Philly?
to that point in my life where I ask myself that question and I stare into
We
the
all
dark.
do. Right. Right. Right.
You know what? I couldn't do it any different.
Right.
I have this pull in me, and Hashem has a good sense of humor,
Mm-hmm.
and he put me on the ferry up here. And I think I couldn't do it any different. And I'm
Wow.
really grateful. I love where I live. Oh, I had a mentor, Rabbi. I'll
Yeah.
share a pearl of
Sure.
wisdom he gave me. He said, you either need to love what you're doing or love who you do it with. Right.
Mm,
So it's, take it apart. But Rabbi, I love what I'm doing and I love who I'm doing it with.
that's
So
amazing.
I'm like a chazer in mud. I wouldn't change a thing.
Wow.
Well, that's a lie. I change a few things.
We all win. We all win.
Overall, I said that
Right.
once. I think I was interviewed once and they said, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" And I said, "If I'm still in this seat doing what I'm doing for who I'm doing with and in this God's country,
Right.
I'm doing all right."
Beautiful. Judge
Yeah.
B, that's
So
so
that's what I
amazing.
got to say.
I think just to cap it off, it's just incredible that and we're so honored to have you on our show, and also just this time of year, because like I said in the beginning, Hanukkah is really a time when we're recognizing the ability that we have the ability to spread light to the world. It's not by chance, I guess, this part of town, specifically your part of town, definitely your part of town, and it's also like the darkest time of the year. Like the world sometimes can be dark and confusing, and I think the message of Hanukkah is like, take that light that's within you, and it's not supposed to be kept just with you. You're supposed to take that light and shine that out to the world, shine that out to the darkness in the world, and light it up for other people, and help them as well. And I think, you talk about Tikkun Olam and what you're doing as a Jew. From our perspective, we're happy that we have you on board, man, and we're so thankful for you to be a messenger in this way and being a light to the people there. And I'm sure, like you said, it's not better, worse. Everyone's learning from each other, but that's what
Mm.
light is, right? We're giving
Mm.
over light. People are giving over light, and we're exchanging, and we're learning, and we're growing peacefully. And I just think the message of Hanukkah really rings true in your world on a day-to-day basis. And mad respect for that, Judge V. We really
Amen.
appreciate you
Amen.
coming on the show,
Amen.
and may you have a much success in the future. And if I ever do my trip to Alaska, I'll be sure to look you up,
know
man.
where to find me now.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. For sure. All right. Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks
Thank
for
you for
joining us
having me.
tonight. Thanks, Judge B. And
Hanukkah
hopefully
Sameach
we'll
to everyone.
Hanukkah
Happy
Sameach.
Hanukkah.
Take care, guys. Happy Hanukkah. Peace.
Bye.